Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and keep watching more details. Lindsie Chrisley has rude awakening with ex amid Todd's guilty verdict. Lindsie Chrisley has hadn't kind things to say about her ex-husband following Todd and Julie's guilty verdict. As those who follow Lindsie on her Instagram profile know, she has refused to talk negatively about her husband. They went their separate ways. They would continue to co-parent Jackson. And that was all anyone needed to know. Lindsie, however, is singing a bit of a different tune now. Turns out, she got no support from her ex-husband amid her father and stepmother's legal battles. And this was a huge issue for her. What did Lindsie have to say about her ex-husband, Will Campbell, exactly? During a recent episode of her Coffee Convos podcast, which she hosts with Kaylin Lowry, Lindsie returned from a brief hiatus. She spent a chunk of the episode detailing what was currently going on with her family. Sadly, Lindsie admits that her ex-husband Will took advantage of her family's current legal issues. Lindsie noted that Will had always been very open and flexible if things came up involving their co-parenting schedule. He, however, was shockingly unwilling to budge or alter their custody arrangement when she explained to him that she needed to be in court. Lindsie, however, did clarify there has always been some bad blood between Todd and her ex-husband. So, his unwillingness to accommodate something involving her parents may have not been a total blindside. She explained during her podcast, "These past 2 weeks has been the roughest, most uncertain time that I've ever felt in my life, and with co-parenting schedules, that has been a little bit hard to navigate. And normally Will is very good about if we have something come up and I give all the details or whatever, it's like, it's okay, we'll switch. But in this situation, I definitely feel that there was a little advantage taken." She's saddened by the guilty verdict. Things have been pretty rocky between Lindsie and her father for a long time. Lindsie, however, has issued a statement that she was putting her differences with her father aside, so she could be there with her family during this difficult time. The news had hit the Chrisley family like a Category 5 hurricane, tearing through the perfectly manicured landscape of their public image and the carefully constructed walls of their private lives. Todd Chrisley, the patriarch and dazzling star of the reality show Chrisley Knows Best, had been convicted alongside his wife Julie on federal bank fraud and tax evasion charges. The guilty verdict was a shockwave that reverberated through every branch of the Chrisley tree, but perhaps nowhere did it land with a more complex, jarring thud than in the life of his estranged daughter, Lindsie Chrisley. Lindsie, who had stepped away from the show and often maintained a public distance from her family's drama, found herself caught in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. The public narrative was simple. The black sheep daughter watches the fall of the empire she left behind. But Lindsie's reality was far more nuanced, a tapestry woven with old wounds, grudging love, and the weary acceptance of a toxic cycle. It was against this backdrop of familial collapse that she experienced what she would later call her rude awakening. A jarring confrontation with her own past, delivered unexpectedly by her ex-husband, Will Campbell. The relationship between Lindsie and Will had always been tumultuous, a mirror of the dramatic, high-stakes lives they led. They had married young, separated, reconciled, and finally divorced, sharing the co-parenting of their son, Jackson, as their only steady tether. For years, they had managed a polite, almost distant coexistence, a functional détente born more out of exhaustion than genuine peace. The rude awakening did not come in the form of a dramatic confrontation, but in the quiet, unnerving intimacy of a shared moment, perhaps over a custody exchange or a discussion about Jackson's schooling. In the wake of the verdict, the phone calls and texts were relentless. The media was ravenous, and the court of public opinion was holding its own noisy, gavel-banging session. The weight of the world felt heavy on Lindsie's shoulders, a familiar, sinking feeling she hadn't anticipated since her escape from the spotlight. "You look exhausted," Will might have observed, his voice stripped of the old acrimony. "Is everything okay?" The question, simple and generic, struck Lindsie with the force of a revelation. She had been bracing for judgment, for the inevitable, "I told you so" from the peanut gallery of her life. She had expected her ex-husband to use this moment of family disgrace as leverage, a way to once again assert his own stability against the chaotic legacy of the Chrisleys. Instead, she received empathy. Lindsie, despite her outward strength and independence, had spent years reacting to the world's perception of her family. Her life had been defined, in part, by her decision to break free from Todd's overbearing control and the show's manipulative narratives. But in that moment, seeing the genuine concern in Will's eyes, a deeply unsettling realization dawned on her. She was still trapped in the drama of her past, not by her father's actions, but by her own reaction to them. The rude awakening was this. For years, Lindsie had viewed her tumultuous relationship with Will, the constant friction, the arguments, the cycles of separation and reunion, as a direct consequence of the Chrisley chaos. It was Todd's meddling, the pressures of fame, the family drama, external factors, that she blamed for the instability of her marriage. She believed that Will had been a victim of the Chrisley whirlwind, just as she had been. But now, facing the true existential threat to the family's foundation, a guilty verdict that promised prison time, she saw the old, toxic dance with Will with startling clarity. The verdict had momentarily stunned her ex into neutrality, forcing him to momentarily step out of their established, adversarial roles. In that brief window of genuine connection and shared stress over their son's future, Lindsie saw the pattern she and Will had established. The cycle of conflict, the refusal to truly move on, the way they weaponized their mutual past to keep each other at arm's length. It wasn't just the toxic influence of her famous family that had wrecked her marriage. It was her own choices, her own patterns of engaging in drama, her own difficulty with true, quiet resolution. The Chrisley verdict was a catastrophic event that, paradoxically, created a moment of profound, quiet clarity in her collapsing around her father, and yet Lindsie felt an odd, terrifying sense of internal peace. Her father was facing the consequences of his actions, an ultimate, unavoidable reckoning. The drama that had fueled her entire adult life, the constant fight for independence, the struggle for acceptance, the toxic communication, was now contained and defined by the courtroom. The rude awakening was the realization that she could choose to leave the drama of her own creation behind as well. Will's momentary kindness, his simple, unadorned concern, was not an attempt to reconcile. It was a demonstration that it was possible to exist outside the exhausting roles they had cast for each other. In the ensuing days and weeks, Lindsie had to navigate the public fallout, the painful reality of her father's fate, and the complex process of grieving the life her family had lost. But the encounter with Will Campbell became a silent benchmark. It was a mirror held up to her own life, reflecting the residual drama she still carried, the unnecessary battles she still fought. She learned that the greatest act of rebellion against the Chrisley chaos wasn't leaving the show or cutting ties. It was the quiet, determined act of creating genuine peace in her own corner of the world. It meant forgiving Will, not just for the sake of their son, but for the sake of her own freedom. It meant forgiving herself for the years she spent blaming outside forces for her internal turmoil. The guilty verdict on Todd Chrisley was a dramatic end to a reality show narrative. But for Lindsie, it was the messy, complicated, and deeply personal moment with her ex-husband that truly signified a new beginning. She had woken up. The sun had set on the gilded cage of her family's fame, and in the shadow of their fall, Lindsie Chrisley finally began to build a foundation that was truly her own, free from the old patterns and the toxic echoes of her past. Her rude awakening was the final, painful step in her long, difficult journey toward self-possession.